My name is Dr. Larry Najarian. I am the president of the Armenian American Health Professionals Organization. We're based out of the New York, Connecticut, New Jersey areas. Really is a pleasure to have you all here during this crisis. This is part of our mission, and that is to provide education for everyone in the public so you can better take care of yourselves. We're armed with facts, not fiction. I think we'll all make much better decisions. We're also available. Our hotline has been very, very active. You can always reach us at info@oppo.org. Before beginning, I would like to extend my sympathies to all of those families that have been impacted by the COVID-19 virus. This has been a devastating disease. But we're learning more and more people may have had it and have been asymptomatic. I also want to acknowledge the leadership in our community. I can tell you that the clergy, the leaders of the many nonprofit organizations that we hear every day, the HBU, the AMAA, Fund for Armenian Relief, all of them, even the ones I didn't mention, have been absolutely amazing, as well as our representatives from the Republic of Armenia. Everybody has been fully engaged, and their erudite actions, which are based on facts, have no doubt helped save Armenian lives here in the diaspora as well as in Armenia. It's been 6 weeks since this crisis hit, and it's amazing how different our lives are. We gradually waded into the water, and slowly and surely we've been learning more about this virus. We've been practicing stricter physical distancing rules, and our lives have changed in many ways, but in one critical way it has not. We all have each other, we have our families, we have our loved ones, and we're safe. That is the most important thing. We're also learning that this is not going to be a 1 or 2 week problem. This is going to be with us for quite some time. How much time? We're going to find out from our experts in just a few moments. But the point to take home is that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Just something for public health information. I can tell you from answering the hotline calls and also talking with many of my friends and colleagues, it's not unusual for many of us to think that we have COVID-19 disease. I would refer you to a wonderful app called COVID-19. It is terrific, it's on your phone, and it will ask you a series of questions. And more than likely, it will answer your questions as to whether you're at no risk, mild risk, or high risk. So this is a wonderful way to go before reaching out to your family physician. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our healthcare providers throughout the world. They're on the front lines. They're really protecting us from this disease. I can tell you from personal stories with them and their families, they are exhausted. They're working hard, they're working valiantly, but they're keeping us safe. And together, we're winning the battle. There are more people recovering from COVID-19 disease today than ever before. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. We happen to be in the New York City area, which has been one of the hardest hit areas in the country, if not the world. There are over 70 vaccines in development, 3 already in clinical trials. In addition, there are many medications that are in clinical trials, which means it's based on evidence to see if they work. And we are getting some initial findings indicating that we do have treatments that may help us should we catch this disease. I now would like to introduce our 2 wonderful speakers. They have been so dedicated in their efforts to help us. You know, there's an expression, a canary in a coal mine. They really have been the bellwethers in our community in the New York City area, alerting us to this problem before any of us could say the word coronavirus. They have been tireless in their efforts, and what's so amazing as we see in so many of our philanthropies is we all do this in our part-time. We all have daytime jobs. How they juggle everything and families on top of that, I don't know, but again, our hats are off to all of our healthcare volunteers and heroes. My first speaker today is Dr. Soline Kojeoglanyan. Celine has been a board member of OPPO for well over a dozen years, has helped us pioneer telehealth technologies. All while the way she's establishing a wonderful academic career as not only an infectious disease expert, but a pediatrician. She's boarded in both. She's currently an associate professor of pediatrics at Maimonides Medical Center. But that really doesn't say the whole story. She is really at the nexus of the local city, state, and federal response efforts at Ground Zero in New York. For whatever reason, the Queens, Bronx, Brooklyn have been a real hotbed for disease. So it's really a great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Soline Kojai-Ogbonna.
So this information I'm going to present to you today is updated as of today, really, April 18, 2020, because we are learning a lot on a daily basis with this new disease. So, you know, things can change over the coming weeks or months, just like they have changed in the past few months. So this is prepared by me. It obviously doesn't reflect the opinion of anybody else, just prepared by the best knowledge I have. And you can see that the title is COVID-19, and COVID-19 was based on coronavirus disease 2019, which is caused by the novel coronavirus. So this is geared towards the general public, so I apologize for those of you who already know this information. So a little bit about the virus. So this novel coronavirus is also called the SARS-CoV-2. The current theory is that it likely originated from a bat virus. It jumped to humans in November or December of 2019 in China, and from then on successfully has been passing on from one person to another. The reason it was named SARS-CoV-2 is because structurally it is very similar to the SARS coronavirus that some of you may remember caused a small epidemic about 15 years ago. So it does belong to the large family of coronaviruses, which are viruses that usually cause the common cold, so they don't worry us that much. But this is a new member of this coronavirus family, and it has not previously been identified in humans. So therefore, we as humans have no immunity, underlying immunity to it, have never seen it before. And that's another reason that this virus is spreading so quickly and widely. As you may remember, it was only a month ago that it was declared a pandemic on March 11, 2020. And Larry alluded to some good, hopeful things to come along. But as of today, again, April 18, we don't really have no proven treatments for it, but a lot of hope via clinical trials. And of course, we don't have vaccines for it, preventive vaccines for it, and we don't expect to have any available for the masses for another at least 12 to 18 months. So once it was declared a pandemic, you can see the graph on the right side showing you that us in New York City, as usual, we are the forefront of everything, including this pandemic. And that first graph that you can see is really the cases in New York City, followed right after by the cases in New York State, and followed by New Jersey. So most of us on this call are unfortunately from these states, and we have really bared the brunt of this disease. And the bottom is really the days in March, and as you can see, there was an exponential increase as of March 15. So what are the manifestations of COVID-19 disease? Typically, if somebody is going to have symptoms, they develop about 5 days after exposure to this virus. But I put in parentheses 2 to 14 days because I'm sure you have heard that the quarantine period or the time to expect symptoms varies between 2 to 14 days after exposure. But the average is about 5 days. So what are the manifestations? As Larry said, we are learning more and more that some people will have no symptoms even though they will have the virus, and they can actually pass along the virus to somebody else without really manifesting any symptoms, or if they do, they're extremely mild and the person may not even pay attention to them. In another subset of patients where we do develop symptoms, fever is going to be a major sign in a majority of patients at some point during their disease. I say at some point because it may not be there the first couple of days and it may develop on the third or fourth day. Fatigue is another manifestation, pretty apparent in about the majority of 70% of cases. Dry cough, dry, relentless, really bothersome cough has been really a hallmark of this disease. It's described in 60% of patients. Poor appetite, lethargy, 40%, muscle aches, 35%. Most of you know that smell and taste disruptions are also quite common in 1/3 of patients. Phlegm is another problem in about 1/3 of patients. And then there are here and there descriptions of headache, sore throat, congestion, which we don't think about. If somebody has nasal congestion, we don't go to COVID-19. But as I said, we're learning a lot of this about this disease every day, and almost everything has been pretty much described with this disease, but they constitute a minority of the population. What is very important to remember is that shortness of breath or trouble breathing are the first sign really that this disease is no longer mild and it's actually moderate to severe. And we learned, I mean, about a month ago, we were thinking if in the first 5 days you're fine, you're good, you're free. Actually, now that we have the disease in the US, we are seeing that the second week of illness is more severe than the first week of illness in those who are going to progress to severe disease. So the shortness of breath and the trouble breathing are developing 5 to 8 days after the initial symptoms start. And you can imagine, therefore, that the hospital admission again follows this shortness of breath and difficulty breathing signs, and therefore again they are occurring during the second week of illness. Not in everybody, but in those who are going to progress, they're progressing in the second week of illness. And trust me guys, if I tell you, again, I'm a pediatrician, I haven't seen as many cases as my adult colleagues, intensivists, anesthesiologists, cardiologists, but this is unlike any other disease any of us doctors has seen. It's a brand new animal. We are learning every single day how it manifests. For example, you may have heard that these patients have extreme oxygen depletion. It's almost like being in very high altitude or drowning. It's really very different from flu and other viruses. Many patients who are in the hospital are having clotting issues, bleeding issues, cardiac complications. Their immune response is so overactive that it's actually making the disease worse. Some people are having seizures and strokes. So this is really, really, in those who are hospitalized, in a small percentage who are hospitalized, causing a lot of havoc. So as you may have heard on the news, many hospitals in our areas had to really increase their capacity to meet the needs. And if we hadn't done the mitigation and the community efforts we talked about, trust me, we would have been overwhelmed and we wouldn't have been able to take care of all these patients. So what are the complications we talked about the complications, but who do the complications occur in? And by complications, again, we mean the small percentage, 20 to 30% who are going to be hospitalized, and unfortunately, some of them may die. As you can see, the highest risk is in the elderly. Above 60 years old is the general term, but death is highest really in the above 80 years old. And as you can see in the graph, it gives you the percentage of hospitalizations, which also correlates with the percentage of death. And as you can see, as the age increases, there is a substantial increase in the percentage of hospitalization and death. It doesn't mean that we don't have hospitalization in the younger age group. You can see the 18 to 49 are also hospitalized. So this disease doesn't spare anyone, but it really hits the elderly the worst. Now, you can be at any age and have any of these chronic medical conditions. And again, this is now US data. We're no longer relying on China to get bits and pieces of information. This is published in the US. So diabetes seems to be really a major risk factor in those ending up in the hospital and dying. Obesity, those who are morbidly obese or moderately obese, unfortunately, are ending up in the intensive care units and dying. High blood pressure, chronic heart disease, which can manifest as either coronary heart disease, atrial fibrillation, or heart failure is the other category. Smokers, COPD, and asthma. We thought that these people with lung disease will actually be top on the list, but somehow they are number 4 and number 5. Immunocompromised, anybody who's undergoing cancer treatment are also number 6 or 7. Again, we thought they might be at higher risk, but so far they don't seem to be the top 3. Kidney disease and pregnant women near the time of delivery. So the true mortality rate, is still to be determined, because as you guys know, testing has not been widely available in most of the states, including the epicenter, New York and New Jersey. So we really don't know how many people truly are infected. For example, in New Jersey, if you half the people who are being tested are positive, or in New York, the people entering the hospital, 70–80% are positive. That means that the disease is much more prevalent than we think. And hopefully, once we do more and more testing, the denominator will increase, and therefore the mortality rate will decrease. But the current numbers range somewhere between 0.7 to 3%. And it's very clear from the graph I showed you now up there that the elderly are going to be the ones who are going to die the most. And as you know, the nursing homes constitute 20% of the deaths seen in the United States. So how about children? Since I'm a pediatric infectious disease specialist, obviously this is where my time is spent the most. The good news is that this disease is affecting children less and is affecting children with mild disease. So if you look at all tested cases, again, tested cases, not all children, just those who we are testing, that only 2% of those tested are children. And children tend to have mild illness. Those that we are seeing in my hospital, they all tend to have much milder illness than I showed you before. So if you take the whole country, there have really been total less than 250 children in the intensive care units countrywide. Obviously, most of them in New York and New Jersey. And there have only been 10 reported deaths, or less than 20 reported deaths so far, compared to obviously the thousands and thousands we are hearing in adults. And 70% of these children who died or had to go into the intensive care unit had other medical conditions. So this is good news for those of you who have children. But children, just because they have mild illness doesn't mean that they're not spreading the virus. So we're not testing them, but we know that when we do test them, it's there. And therefore, children, of course, they also don't wash their hands as frequently. They touch their face, touch everything else, touch the toys, touch the home surfaces. So they are believed to be contributing to community-based viral transmission. How much, we don't know, but they definitely are. And there is good news that so far there's no evidence that there is mother-to-baby transmission during pregnancy or at the time of delivery, but there is transmission at home. So we have seen a couple of babies we admitted at 1 week of age, 2 weeks of age, went home and then came back because the parents had the disease, and the children came back actually mildly ill, just with fever. But fever in a baby, as you guys know, can be anything. So these babies still had to stay in the hospital, had a bunch of blood work done, spinal tap, everything done. Luckily, they did well. But again, in order to avoid that, we want to make sure that people who are sick at home are separating themselves from babies and other at-risk people. Okay, so if you come in close contact with a person with COVID-19, what to do? You have to stay home in quarantine. Quarantine means you don't have symptoms yet, but you definitely know that you were in contact with someone with COVID-19. And if you remember, we said the disease can develop anywhere between 2 to 14 days, and that's why the quarantine is for 14 days. And this is again in order to prevent the spread of the virus from one person to the other. Obviously, call your healthcare provider if you develop symptoms. Now, if you are sick with COVID-19 or think you have COVID-19, and again, to help protect your family members and the community, and I'm sure you have seen on the news, for example, Cuomo and his wife, Stephanopoulos and his wife, and in our community, we know that husband-wife household transmission is pretty high, and that's not unusual. You will see why in a few slides. So again, in the home, we want you to stay home, but also isolate yourself inside the house. And that's the last home isolation. So what does that mean? Separate yourself from other people in your home as much as possible. Stay in a separate room if available. Use a separate bathroom if available. Have your own utensils, your own bedding, your own soap, your own toothpaste. Everything that you touch has to be disinfected. By you, we mean the sick person. And stay home, we said number one, and stay in touch with your doctor. Very important, right? So, because you can, as I said, in the first week have mild illness, and then the second week things may get worse. So you need to at least make your doctor aware that you're having some symptoms. If your symptoms are mild, your doctor is just going to tell you take some rest, hydrate, take some medication. And then if you get worse, they need to be aware so that when you come to the clinic, you're prepared and they are prepared to receive you. Obviously, avoid public transportation if possible. So how long do we need to stay isolated after we have COVID-19? And we were lucky in the 80% group that didn't deteriorate and didn't end up needing hospitalization. So the current guidelines tell us that we need to have at least 7 days passed from the onset of symptoms. So let's say you started your cough or fatigue or muscle aches 5 days ago, it's still too early to leave the house, even if you're feeling better. So at least 7 days have to have passed, plus, and you have to have at least 3 days without fever whatsoever, without fever medication. So no Tylenol, no Advil, no fever for 3 days. And your cough, which is the most important thing and the one that transmits the virus, has also to have improved. So, I mean, in certain situations where somebody is undergoing cancer therapy or other chronic conditions, your doctor may elect to actually test you and make sure you don't have the virus before letting you back out. But in general, in the absence of widespread testing, these are the guidelines for coming out of isolation after you are ill. So what is testing for COVID-19? You're hearing about it all the time. So just for, again, the general public, there are 2 types of tests we do for viruses in general, including this novel coronavirus. So one test called the PCR on the left side is looking for the virus itself. Is the virus there or not there? And the serology or the antibody test on the right side is actually a test we do that looks for our body's response to the virus, right? So this is a foreign stimulus, it's coming into our body, so our body responds by an immune reaction. And that's what we are measuring with the antibody or serology test. So for the virus on the left side, you can see that the sample is collected from the nose, from the back of the throat, from a phlegm for those who are in the hospital. And even now there is a new test approved by saliva. So all you need to do is spit in a cup and hopefully be able to send that for testing. Versus the antibody test is collected from blood. You have to actually collect blood from the vein. There are people selling products with a finger prick. Don't believe them, please. These are scammers, and there's no test of antibody or serology that works with a finger prick blood. On the left, the virus PCR, we collect it usually when somebody is sick, having symptoms. If on the right, the antibody response is usually done after somebody recovers. As I said, this is our immune response to the virus. It usually takes 2 to 4 weeks for our immune response to happen. So when we test antibodies with antibodies while we are sick, that test may be negative. So we have to wait till our immune response has developed and then obtain the blood and see if we have an antibody response. For the viral test, we get the results the same hour, same day, or several days, depending on where you're living, what your setup is. But more and more tests are coming to the market that hopefully can give us answers the same day. If it's going to take 6 to 7 days to know what I have, then it's really not a useful test. Versus the antibody test, as you can see, there is actually only 3 FDA approved tests so far, and there are several in the market. Again, beware, there are people trying to sell the product, and the products are not always giving good results. There are problems with false negatives and false positives. What that means is that if it's an inaccurate test, it will give me an inaccurate answer, and I will either be falsely having a sense of security. Oh, I'm positive, I'm fine, I'm not going to be reinfected, I can go out, or vice versa. So please beware of these antibody tests that your doctors even or somebody else may market to you. Stick to well-known laboratories to do these kind of tests. And with the antibody testing, unfortunately, there's a lot unknown. We don't know if somebody tests positive for an antibody. Does that mean that they are protected from getting the virus again? We don't know that yet. And if they are protected, how long are they protected? We don't know that yet. So remember, these tests just came to the market, just coming out, and therefore a lot has to be learned on the field as we go along. And we will update you once we have answers. So two more slides. How is coronavirus transmitted? We talked about the disease and the testing, and you can see on the right, this is actually a very cool video that somebody said, stay healthy. They're not coughing, they're not sneezing, they're just saying the word stay healthy or stay safe, something we're wishing each other all day long these days. As you can see, just by speaking, there was emission of all these little droplets in the air that can actually contain virus. Okay, so the idea here is that this coronavirus is a respiratory virus. Therefore, it is really transmitted mainly by these kind of small droplets in the air. And these droplets are generated when we cough, when we sneeze, and even when we sigh or when we speak. And therefore they can, so for someone who's not sick and not coughing and sneezing, but may still have the virus, just by speaking or sighing can potentially emit these little droplets that contain viruses, and that virus can potentially infect somebody else who is near the infected person. We talk about something called Rho-2-3. You can see in the title. That means that from one infected person, this virus can infect 2 to 3 other people, which makes it much more contagious than the influenza virus. Okay, so droplets is the main way, but there's also potential for contact with contaminated surfaces. So you guys have heard that there are some papers showing that the virus can survive 1 or 2 days on plastic and on steel. So potentially, especially in areas with high burden of virus, like in hospitals or the cruise ships, there was some thought that some people got infected by touching such contaminated surfaces and then touching their nose or touching their eye or touching their mouth, and that's how they got the virus. This is, this contributes less to the overall picture of droplet transmission, but it is something to remember. So based on what I told you, therefore, the highest risk of getting the virus are in those who are close contacts of persons with COVID-19. So close contacts means you are within 6 feet or 2 meters of a case for a prolonged period of time. And these 2 meters came by, again, studies showing that when you cough or you sneeze, how far these particles can travel. And looks like probably 2 meters is the farthest they're going to travel. So if you are within 6 feet of an infected person for a prolonged period of time, so obviously when you're caring for them, living with them, or sharing a waiting room with them, that's really what puts you at risk. And hence our recommendations to reduce close contacts. Or obviously if somebody coughs on you, if you have direct contact with infectious secretions. So therefore, based from what I told you is really why we're doing all these personal prevention measures. We are asking you to wash your hands because this is where the virus might sit. And if you touch your face, your eyes, that's how you can get the virus. So soap and water, 20 seconds. Everybody has heard this ad nauseum, so I don't need to go over it again. Avoid crowded, enclosed, poorly ventilated spaces. Obviously, those of us who are stay at home, we're not doing that. But for those of you who are in areas where there is not much virus transmission, you still have to avoid the crowded, enclosed, poorly ventilated spaces based on what I showed you here, how this virus is transmitted. Obviously, we stopped shaking hands, kissing hello, kissing goodbye. Cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched objects and services. Again, make sure you use any household product and clean light switches, tabletops, doorknobs, cell phones, commonly touched surfaces in the home, especially if someone is sick in the home. Make sure, guys, that you get all your vaccinations, and this goes for the children as well. I know there's a lot of parents worried about taking their children to the pediatrician, for example, to get their vaccines done. Please, we don't want to create another problem by fixing the coronavirus problem. Most doctors have made sure that there is a separate area for sick visits and separate area for healthy children. Everybody in healthcare settings is wearing masks, so you should be able to safely take your children to get their vaccines, especially children under 2 years of age. Eat healthy. That's always important, and we get asked this question a lot, so that's why I included it, that before handling food that you bring in from outside, wash your hands well. Vegetables don't need to be cleaned in vinegar or Dettol or whatever, just clean water, and the food can be consumed as usual as long as it's cleaned, cooked, and chilled appropriately. Avoid stress, easier said than done. So, and then again, because of how I said this virus is transmitted, as of April 3rd, 2020, more and more data came that you can even transmit the virus while you have no symptoms. So you all know that the CDC now recommends that every time you're going out, if you have to go out to a place where you cannot control social distancing, like in a supermarket, in a pharmacy, and you may even have the virus and you don't know it yet. So by putting that face mask, you're going to protect others from getting your infection. Okay, so it's really the person who is sick who's protecting others by putting the mask.
So thank you for setting us up, Tolin, and I wanted to take it from there and just give you, I was thinking yesterday about what I should mention. You know, Tolin and I are on these calls a lot, and I knew she was going to give a very excellent and comprehensive update about what the virus is and the virus today. I thought I would take a moment to put this in context, into historical context, and then bring us up to today and talk about what are the key indicators that public health advocates are looking for in order to loosen the social distancing. But before we get to that, I just thought I would give you a brief history of why we know to do social distancing and sort of a history of social distancing. This is a photograph of a newspaper clipping from the 1918-1919 flu pandemic. So I just am bringing your attention to the Department of Health Daily Bulletin in this paper, and I just think it's interesting that a year ago, 100 years ago, a century ago, we were talking about washing your hands, keeping your hands out of your mouth, don't go to crowded places, walk to work instead of taking public transportation. And so it's interesting just to see that this, these basic evidence-based behaviors have been in place. You know, scientists have known about this for a while, but they didn't always know about it. I also put this slide up to show the audience. I know many of you are healthcare providers and many of you are not, but just I think that there's some sentiment in the general public that this is something, the virus, yes, is new. The concept of pandemics and outbreaks and infectious disease is not new. And while it's true that the majority of death and disease in the world is now from what we call non-communicable diseases, communicable diseases are very active. And this world map just shows you the breadth of different types of infectious diseases that have emerged within the last century. So a brief history, and it all comes from history.com, but we do get taught this in our schools of public health. And I just wanted to point out to the audience that the plague is really this, this single bacterium, Yersinia pestis, that is a plague that for centuries actually has caused immeasurable death, and first started in 500 BC, and really the first plague of this bacterium killed an estimated 30 to 50 million people, which was maybe half of the world's population at that time. And it didn't go away. It kind of went dormant and then became active again. And this is a painting from 1411, which describes, the plague again. And in this century, about 200 million lives were lost in 4 years. And again, as people have traveled the world, they have also been vectors to spread disease. The plague didn't end there. It sort of rebounded, and there was the Great Plague of London. The Great Plague of London was, by the 1500s, it was killing many, many people in London. I wanted to mention this thing about quarantine. I found this really cool on this site, that this was, in the 1400s, 1500s, this was the first time that people made the connection about isolation and this idea of social distancing or physical distancing. And I thought what was cool is that sailors coming into ports were held on their ship originally for 30 days, But then the Venetians increased the isolation to 40 days, which in Italian is quarantino. And that's where we get the word quarantine from, even though we're not asking people today to stay in their homes for 40 days. But I thought that was just a cool historical context about the quarantine. So again, plague continues in the early 1500s. And the last time that the plague was, a huge epidemic was during this period of time. But at this time now, by the time you're in the 1500s, 1600s, you really have, as soon as people are sick, there are isolation measures, there are houses that are identified as having sick people within them with various visuals, and people were actually kept in their homes and very cruelly on some level made to die that way. But the thinking is that that's what ended that particular epidemic. So, smallpox was endemic to Europe for a long time, but the death rate was not really comparable until Europeans then traveled into the New World. And the indigenous peoples of what is now today Mexico and the United States had zero natural immunity to smallpox. And so the virus really cut them down by the tens of millions of people. And the eventuality of a vaccine of smallpox led to the annihilation. Right now, we don't have smallpox. And I think it took a long time, but there is this historical context within which we're seeing these pandemics, lack of immunity, growth in immunity, and then, modern technology being applied. So just to get back to what we call this sort of the grandfather of epidemiology is a guy named John Snow. And during a cholera outbreak in London, there was the first contact tracing of people who were sick with cholera. And this doctor, John Snow, he sort of looked at a map and realized that there was the source of the infection was in fact water. And when he got the water pumps to be removed in the certain neighborhoods, they were able to stop the epidemic. So there's a quick overview. Getting us back to where I started in the Spanish flu, which really did not start in Spain. So it's unfortunate for the Spanish that they get that title, but the influenza pandemic killed about a third of the world's population. And the mortality rate was particularly high. The animal reservoir here was birds. And I want to include this slide because we're talking about loosening our social distancing policies. And the flu, as we know historically, was presented in 3 different waves of illness during the pandemic. So this is the first wave, and then social distancing loosened up. There was a severe second stage where many more people died in the second stage, and then there's the third stage. So these were these pandemic waves, and that's when Solin left with the last slide showing you these curves. We're wondering, we don't know yet what the second curve will look like, but we know we can probably anticipate that there will be a second curve. And so the question really becomes, how do we open up? I'm going to get to that in a second. This slide I put in, it's a slide from the New York City Department of Health. It's all-cause mortality, so the deaths from everything, not just coronavirus, by year. So the horizontal axis is by year, and from the year 2000 until just April 4th of 2020. So what I just want to show, because there's some people that I know, I see that there's some messaging that more people die from other things than from coronavirus. Why should we be, so concerned? Isn't it being over-reported? The media is just focusing on this too much. And really, this graph shows you that these are the average expected deaths from all causes in a given year in New York City. Okay. Obviously, September of 2001, there was an exception with the death of so many people tragically in the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center. But in the right, you can see that already, and I think this is an undercounting, and that was on April 4th. Now we're on April 17th. We've had many more deaths since then. So this peak would go much, much higher. But I wanted to include this slide because I think it's important to show that all-cause deaths are increasing, and this is not an over-reporting issue, that the differential from the average the differential is going to explain why public health advocates are in fact so aggressively advocating for policies that may seem certainly economically disruptive and socially disruptive, but there is a reason for this aggressive advocacy. I just wanted to point that out. For those of you who are healthcare providers, you know that, but for those of you who are not, I think the data kind of does speak for itself on this. So before I finish up, I just wanted to say I am not an expert on what's going on in Armenia, but I did want to point out that if for those of you on this call that are interested in what's happening in Armenia, this is a site on Facebook, the Armenian United Info Center. There's also a website called ncdc.am, that's the National Center for Disease Control in Armenia, and they put out daily tallies of the coronavirus epidemic there. So in this slide, you can see that there are 1,248 positive cases, and 523 of them, so over a third, have already, of those positive cases, they're no longer active. So they've already gotten a double negative test after their 14 days, and they are back out into their homes and their families. Interestingly, this is a screenshot from the Minister of Health, Arsen Torosyan's Facebook page. So Facebook is a major communication platform in Armenia. And since there is a plethora of people with smartphones, they're able to access this data. And I like the fact that the minister and his risk communication is very transparent about the data on a day-to-day basis, but is also trying to teach the public so that they engage in the continuation of stay-in-place policies. So in this slide, he's showing that the doubling of the coronavirus has taken 17 days, whereas in the beginning, the doubling was much, much shorter in terms of time. So they've really slowed the transmission in Armenia through stay-in-place policies as well. So what are the 4 key indicators for loosening the social distancing? Again, I don't like the phrase social distancing, but it's what was used originally, so we continue with that. So public health advocates advocate for 14-day consistent decline in new cases. We are not there yet, but it does appear that cases are plateauing, at least certainly new hospital admissions are significantly fewer. And so we will start to be calculating that 14-day decline. And that's why you're seeing some of the estimates about dates and times, the end of April, the mid-May, you're seeing that discussion. Sorry. The other thing is that we need to ensure that if we're preparing for a second spike, because we think historically this has happened and it may happen again. Again, as Solin mentioned, depending on how many people truly have been exposed, which is still an unknown, we need to be sure that we have hospital capacity in terms of beds and space, personal protective equipment, and healthcare providers themselves. This capacity was doubled, tripled, quadrupled in many healthcare centers, but that's not sustainable over the long run. We need to be sure that we can anticipate what the second spike will look like, and so that people who need to get into the hospital can do so. Testing capacity has been spoken about a lot. There is the unfortunate reality that the systems needed in order to maximize testing capacity simply are not in place. It's not enough just to have the tests and to have space to conduct the tests. We also need all of the reagents and equipment to read the test, to read it accurately, and then we need to be able to have the workers who are doing that, and that we need to be able to communicate that testing back to the patient. That's a lot of steps in a large system that our country simply wasn't able to get up to speed very quickly. So testing capacity is one that you'll also be hearing talked about a lot. Even though I'm in public health, and I know that the foundation of public health and infectious disease is to be able to identify your cases, I'm still not clear on how testing capacity in and of itself without these other indicators would be helpful. Because again, as Tolene mentioned, we have transmission from asymptomatic cases. They're not going to run out and get a test. And then even we have a lot of high false negatives. And so, you know, there may be issues with that, or you could be positive today and then take the bus to work tomorrow, and then you're exposed. And like, how often are you going to be getting tested? So for me, that's an area of interest. And the final capacity area that needs to be met is this ability to monitor. So let's say I go and get tested, and I have, let's say Bergen County ramps up in a way that I can get tested at first sign of symptom. I get a positive test within 24 hours. I'm told to isolate. But who is monitoring me to be sure that I'm not going out, going to work, infecting others? There has to be some way that I can be called, I can be monitored. There's discussion about utilizing cell phones and things like that to monitor, not in a terribly punitive way, but in a more supportive way, but also to make sure that the people I come in contact with can also be contacted and do this whole testing again. So that's the last slide I have about this discussion. I wanted to bring up some major questions that we know are frequently asked questions, go through those, and then we'll go through the chat box. So if you have questions, please add those. The first question we get all the time is, how long will the pandemic last? And the truth is, we do not know. We don't know how or when this is going to end. We have some hopes for how it will end, and I think that I'll ask Tolene to address that after I go through a couple of the major challenges and questions. Is the virus sensitive to seasonal changes? And I think that so far the data shows that we don't think that it is sensitive. The countries that are in the Southern Hemisphere are experiencing the virus as well, and the testing is low in many countries, so we don't have maybe high case reporting, but we don't believe that it's sensitive to seasonal changes. Sorry, Tony, you jump in anytime you want to.
Keep going, perfect.
Could this virus be something that circulates permanently in the way that I was showing you historically, that there are viruses that do circulate permanently and we just learn to live with them? And there is, again, not a sense yet about whether or not this is something we'll be living with for a very, very long time. And that's because we still don't have data on a lot of the variables that are important in answering this. We don't have a sense about the immunity yet, as Tolene mentioned. We don't yet have a vaccine or a sense of whether and when we're getting a vaccine, and what's the efficacy of that vaccine. In other words, how much does it protect you and for how long? We don't know when that's going to happen, but there is a sense, as Tolene mentioned, there's certainly, there are a number of clinical trials in place. And if ever in history we were able to roll out a vaccine quickly, this is going to be the epidemic that we might be able to do that. There are other coronaviruses where labs have been working on the basic science foundations to develop a vaccine for 2 decades now. And so, you know, a lot is going on to try to work very quickly to get a vaccine. A lot of trials are out. Why is the mortality rate low in children and high in elderly? I think because we have a pediatric infectious disease specialist. I'll just pass that on to you, Tolene, to answer.
So we don't exactly know why, but we do think that there might be a receptor or something that children are lacking, such that the virus is not able to necessarily invade cells and cause as much damage as it is causing in the elderly. That's the running theory. Obviously, a lot of research has to be done to prove that.
And then what proportion of the population, this is the last one, what proportion of the population needs to become infected to afford this idea of community immunity or herd immunity, which you've heard a lot about for other infectious diseases, that if only X% of the population is vaccinated or has been exposed and has the antibodies, then the people who have not been exposed nor have been vaccinated end up being protected because the people in the community around them are protected. And so there's not a mode of transmission. But again, we don't know what
we don't know how this virus is going to be really, because viruses, as you said, Kim, are different. So for example, you get measles once, of course we don't want to get it, but those who have gotten it before the vaccine came in, they're protected for life. Versus we know that influenza, for example, because it mutates so much, we need to get vaccinated for it every year. So we don't know where this virus is going to be, because we don't know if once we get infected, are we going to have long-term immunity? Or as you said, is this going to be something that we're going to live with? Just like we have flu season, are we going to have COVID season? So that remains to be seen.
So this is the last sort of broad question, because I know these are very common questions. I thought I'd put them into the slides, and now we can go more specifically to your questions in the chat room. There's one in particular that I read I want to start with, and Solin, you can jump on, and then we'll have Larry moderate. And the question is from John Haitayan. Thank you for your question. The question is, do we know why the New York metro area has been so hard hit, taking away the obvious of the large, close concentration of people? And so I think that you can't, I know you're saying taking that away, aside from the fact that we have very high density of population, I don't think that you can just underestimate the value of the high density, in addition to which we're a hub for international travel. So the virus was coming into the communities long before we had a sense of its expanse, and long before we had a sense of its transmission. Right? And then in addition to that, New York has a very diverse population. Much of the population does have high rates of comorbidities. And so you have this area of comorbidities, international travel and exposure, and population density. And it makes sense, therefore, that New York would have very, almost like a match to dry grass. It would have gone very quickly. I don't know if Solin, you want to add anything to that?
Absolutely agree. You cannot compare New York to, let's say, Kentucky, right? So we do have thousands of planes arriving with thousands of international travelers every day. And even after the travel ban from China, JFK remained one of the airports that was accepting people from China. And there was really no screening or no quarantine of such patients. People were just entering, being just told, advised to stay home. But we know that if you don't enforce that, many people didn't stay home. And at the same time, the lack of testing, because if we didn't have enough testing, we were sending everything to Albany to test someone in the beginning in February. So obviously, if we had local testing available, it would have probably controlled it a little bit better. And last but not least, the capacity, the human capacity to actually trace the contacts of everyone who was positive and make sure those are quarantined in such a big city of 8 million people really is very difficult.
So I just wanted to add one thing, that you mentioned that people were coming in from China, but again, there was an interesting study that showed that the strain of virus that has really been the driver of the transmission in New York has actually come in through Europe, because they can sort of do that analysis. And so, that's the thing. So you sort of block flights from China, but people from China are coming in through Europe, but then also Europeans are now sick, Europeans are coming in. Again, I think one of the key, when this chapter is written as the history chapter of this pandemic.
We hear so much about coronavirus, and our medical system now is so directed towards coronavirus. But when I talk to my colleagues in the emergency room, they're asking, where do all the heart attacks go? Where did all the strokes go? Can both of you speak a little bit about the consequences of our focus on coronavirus and the impact on other diseases for which patients are not necessarily being treated?
I showed a slide that that looks at all-cause mortality, and certainly heart disease. Let's take the most heart disease worldwide accounts for the highest burden of disease and all cause, of all cause mortality. It's the top leading cause of disease. So there are people who are unfortunately still dying of cardiac events. The question is here, one of the reasons why there's a thinking that there's underreporting of COVID-19 tests, COVID-19 deaths, is this issue of testing, right? And we know that COVID-19 and the way it presents can also lead to, for example, a cardiac event. The hospital systems, I mean, New York has been tight, but there are hospital systems that are reconfiguring who has which emergent issue to go elsewhere and to different hospitals and different systems to try to address this issue of other diseases. Solene, I'm going to kick it to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously there's going to be, in retrospect, missed heart attacks, missed strokes where it's too late to intervene. And it's really, we never really stopped. I mean, unfortunately, there was some messaging problem because the doctors never stopped telling people, don't come in if you're having chest pain, or don't come in if your appendix, if your belly hurts. So, but I think there was a fear in general of people thinking, okay, so the hospitals are full of COVID-19, I'm not going to go and catch the virus. So unfortunately, that is a collateral damage that we're only going to know, once this is over, how bad that damage was. But, the messaging obviously didn't come from the healthcare workers. And I think there was an issue with EMS also. I don't think we had enough ambulances to transfer heart attack patients to the hospitals, unfortunately, especially again in these two states where the burden has been much higher than other places in the country or the world.
Wonderful answer. And I think the take-home message for all of us is, if there are any medical problems with you or your loved ones, do not hesitate to call your primary medical physician. And also the flu vaccine. Can you make a comment on the flu vaccine? We're concentrating so much on coronavirus.
Sure. So actually, usually we do see flu in March and in April, but right now, because everybody's at home, right? And flu is also transmitted by droplet and contact. So we really show a sharp decline in flu and flu-like activity because of the COVID-19. But when the season comes again, next season, of course, we should all get our flu vaccines. The elderly above 65 should get their pneumococcal vaccines. Anything available to prevent what's known to cause serious damage should be done. Right now, I would say no need to get the flu vaccine. The season is over. And I do want to say, coming back to the other diseases, that, most hospitals now have such a good control of separating and screening everyone who has COVID-19. They won't be putting you in a room with a COVID-19 patient. Right. So we don't want people really to be scared if they have an emergency or something that's not right to go to the emergency rooms and be taken care of.
You both touched on this briefly, but I'd like to address it again. If a person has the virus and they recover, is there something that we can do with their blood serum? Are the antibodies something that will be a potential treatment to help other people? And the other part of that is, once they've had the virus, can they transfer the virus to somebody else when they've recovered? Again, partially answered, but let's readdress the issue, please.
Okay, so antibodies for different viruses have historically different uses, and the tests are not always perfect. So we are trying to have this perfect test for coronavirus where it tells us that once it's positive, that means that we are immune, that means we will not transfer the infection to somebody else, and that we are immune for life. So these are open questions that we haven't had a chance to answer yet, because again, the disease has only been around, guys, for less than 2 months, right? So if the disease is new, the test is new, the interpretation of the test is new, so the jury is still out on that. We hope that we will develop a beautiful test, like Trump says, beautiful test, where we can use it and it will be helpful to determine who's immune, and if you're immune, do you have enough antibodies to help somebody else? What Larry is referring to is plasma therapy. It has been used in the past for measles and other dangerous infections, where you need a certain amount of antibody from a person who recovered from a disease, take their blood, separate those antibodies in what we call plasma, and give it to someone who is sick with the virus, hoping that somebody else's antibody goes and neutralizes the virus of the sick person. And there are already trials going on in the country to use this modality of treatment. Again, they are trials, meaning we don't know if they are going to make a big difference or not, but it is a promising form of treatment. In order for us to be able to take somebody's antibody and use it for someone else, we need what we call quantitative antibody measurements. It's not enough just to say positive or negative, which most tests in the market right now are just yes or no. So in the hospitals where they're using plasma therapy, they have developed a little bit more sophisticated tests, antibody tests, where they measure the quantity. So if you have very little antibody, they're not going to use your plasma. But if you developed a robust immune system and have a lot of antibody that they can quantitate, that's what they're going to use for plasma therapy. As far as the question regarding once you have the antibody, can you still transmit the virus? Yes, in the first week of illness, when your antibody response is emerging, you are still infectious, or even the second week of illness. So it's really when you are sick, whether you develop antibodies or not, it doesn't matter. When you're sick, you're going to be transmitting the virus. People think that, as I said, asymptomatic, there is transmission, small percentage. When you're sick is you're most infective. And then in the recovery phase, you might also still be infective a little bit. So it's like a bell-shaped curve. And then once you develop robust antibodies, again, the thought is that we shouldn't be infective anymore, but that remains to be proven.
You know, you raise another timely question that's been talked about in the press this week, and that is the concept of once you've recovered, people getting coronavirus for a second time. Are they really getting coronavirus a second time, or is it really representing lingering virus in people that are, quote, recovered?
I don't really even want to comment on that, Larry, only because the data came from a really non-medical journal from China. We have learned over the past couple of months that we cannot take everything that comes from China, you know, to face value. So let's wait and see if we're going to have any US data showing that reinfection can happen, or even reactivation can happen. Because some viruses remain dormant in the body. Usually coronaviruses don't. But again, this is a brand new one. We don't know how it's going to react. Some viruses, like herpes viruses, is a great example. You never get cured of them and they reactivate. So there is the phenomenon of reactivation as well, which needs to be determined. So let's leave it on the side and answer it when we have more data.
Another newsworthy item is the 5G, and there's a question of whether 5G is somehow related to coronavirus. Can either of you address that?
It is stunning to people in the field, but not in general to the society, that people are looking for explanatory mechanisms for explaining this phenomenon. I think the 5G was, I mean, that sounds like an oddity. Obviously, there is no connection with 5G cell towers to the transmission of the virus. There have also been, I think, very odd and, I mean, inappropriate conspiracy theories about this being either germ warfare or, again, since there was cells in human evolution, there have been viruses, right? The idea that somehow people like Bill Gates, who have spent their whole life working to reduce deaths and disease worldwide, that somehow he would have been responsible for the creation of this virus. I mean, it's any number of conspiracy theories. I would encourage anybody who has, a sense of these kinds of theories to always look at the source of the data and to go to reliable websites to look for explanations. Anytime that you see an article that's on your social media feed, you really want to look for the source of the article, and you can go to the original article and look for that source and its references.
And I would say really, we are not that smart to create such a deadly virus. I would really say that nothing, nothing could have imagined that we could be dealing with something like this. And I'm an infectious disease specialist, right? So there's thousands of viruses, thousands of bacteria, thousands and parasites. So this is one out of thousands that are living with us. We basically, live with these agents. So it's just the unfortunate chance and that this happens, but this has happened in the past, like Kim said, the influenza pandemics and plague. So, and it's going to happen in next generations as well. There are a couple of questions I want to answer. So one says, is there any connection between eye diseases like a pink eye and COVID-19? So far, COVID-19 has not been associated, at least in children and in adults, with the pink eye. But as I said, every day we are seeing new manifestations of this disease. Some people are reporting on unusual rashes. Some people are now reporting on really the neurological manifestations, seizures, Guillain-Barré syndrome. So it remains to be seen if it's going to also cause what we call conjunctivitis or redness of the eye. But so far, it has not been described. And the other one is hydroxychloroquine. I deliberately left the treatment slides out because it is, there is really nothing proven at this point that any of these medications work. As Larry said, we have a bunch of clinical trials, and really clinical trials is the only way to go to both prove safety and efficacy. And, as I said, this is a coronavirus. We know this family of viruses, but it has never caused these significant disease before, so we never bothered testing medications for this virus or creating a vaccine for it. So hydroxychloroquine really has been used in the lab for certain viruses. It helps some viruses, it hurts others. It also can actually reduce a little bit the immune system. As you know, that's why it's used in rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune diseases. So it's not a benign drug. And of course, you have also heard about its cardiac complications, especially when it's being used with azithromycin. So this, however, took fire because, again, we are desperate to treat this disease. And again, a doctor from the south of France, I don't know why everything is coming from the south of France, was the first who published, again, a small number of patients with no controls, so just his patients, claiming that patients on this combination did better. So they could have just gotten better without these medications. We don't know. So we really have to wait for controlled placebo trials to see if there's really any role for these medications. In the Armenian community, and you have heard me say this, I heard some people just had a sore throat, called their doctor, and literally within 24 hours were already prescribed hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. That is wrong management. There is no data to support that, and you could actually put yourself in harm. I mean, if you really are manifesting into the 5th day of illness, cough and fever, and you have high suspicion of COVID-19, in a controlled setting, you may be prescribed this medication, as I said, in a controlled setting. But over the phone, with a little bit of a scratchy throat, to be prescribed these medications is a wrong practice. There is a drug that shows promise. It is called remdesivir. It's actually good because this drug was already tested in clinical trials for safety. They thought it could work for hepatitis C, it didn't. For Ebola, it didn't. But at least the trials for safety have been done. And now we know it's safe enough, and it's showing some promising results in this disease, COVID-19. But it's only investigational, meaning you cannot go to the pharmacy and take it, and it's given intravenously. So hopefully this will be, used early on in disease and really make a big difference to prevent hospitalization and death. But we are not there yet.
We're in the middle of a crisis right now. But if we sit back and reflect where we're going to be 18 months, 24 months from now, when we have a better handle on this virus, what changes do you think there will be in our culture, our society, how we interact with each other?
I'll start, but I do see that we have some clergy and some community members on this call, and I'm thankful that you're here and welcome. We have spoken about when can we go back to church, when can we go back to community life, and I think that you know, protocols and guidance are being developed, and we're going to see it maybe a staggered reintroduction into society. But obviously things like, as you say in your question, Christina, is you know, handshakes are gone. And Tony Fauci has said that in a press conference. Given the mode of transmission, until we really feel quite safe, and I think it's going to be quite a while before we feel safe. So it's going to be interesting to watch how human behavior will change. Going to the movies, concerts, theaters, anything that's a large gathering in an enclosed space, I think that's off the table for quite some time. Are there ways that we can safely, or let's put it this way, there is not going to be ever a zero risk exposure, but are there ways that we can continually think of reducing risk? And so I think that the use of masks, which has been very high in Asian countries in the last 20 years. They've become fashionable. There's different colors and styles. And I think that the idea that we're going to be using masks when we're in public is probably here for a while, unless something dramatic and unexpected changes with the virus, meaning something like either herd immunity or, you know, universal exposure or something like that. So I do agree that we're going to be changing behaviors. And I think for many of you in the community, you're trying to figure out, when can we, I saw a save the date email for a 70th anniversary of an Armenian organization gala in 2021. And I just think, it just struck me that people are trying to plan, you know, a year out. And I think,
But I mean, but again, guys, a lot is unknown. I agree, Kim. But again, it depends on how this virus is going to behave. If it turns out that it is a virus that is going to be around, but the next time you get it is a milder disease, right? Then it's good news. Then this first wave, again, remember my first slide was that human beings have never been exposed to this virus before. Therefore, it's the first time our bodies are reacting to it.
right.
So the second time we're exposed to it, hopefully is a milder disease, right? So in that case, that's good news, and we will be able to go back to some normalcy. And again, vaccine, if we do have successful vaccines by next year, that's another way we're going to hopefully prevent disease. So I think that the answer is we don't know. In the near future, yes, we're going to not shake hands, not kiss goodbye. You know, every physical contact has to be reduced in the near future, 2020, let's say. But by the end of the year, we will have enough data to see whether this is going to be seasonal, it's going to be milder next season, where the vaccine is going to be, what medications we're going to have. So, but now is the important part. And again, you know, I want to commend all those who did listen to the instructions, stayed home. It's not easy. None of us have been through this kind of measures before, even though historically there has been, like Kim said, it's very tough. But it was the only thing available right now with this deadly disease I showed you. Doctors overwhelmed by what they're going to do. I'm not even giving you the details of how many times we scratched our heads. What's going on now? This is very different from the next patient with COVID-19. So for us, it's been very stressful to figure this disease out. And with no medication and no vaccine, the only thing you're going to do by this highly contagious virus is stay home. But again, hopefully soon, as we have more things available, we will be able to come out a little.
You know, vaccine development is talked a lot, and it's made to sound like a sure thing, that it's definitely going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months. Can you make any comments about how vaccines are development and its level of complexity?
There are different type of vaccines, Larry, and I'm not sure how much the audience wants to know, but these type of vaccines actually under development right now are new modalities. It's not the classical ones we have used traditionally for other things. So that's why it's exciting. That's why it was able to happen so fast. But at the same time, they're not similar to previous vaccines we have used, so we don't know their safety, their efficacy. That's where I'll leave it.
And from a public health point of view, the safety of a vaccine is of the utmost importance because these vaccines are going to be given to healthy people. And if healthy people get sick, it's really going to destroy confidence in the government and the scientists and the whole vaccine program. So again, this is a very delicate, complicated subject, but we want to be aspirational. We want to be hopeful that we do have it in 12 to 18 months. I think it will be a game changer. We have a host of questions regarding pregnant women and their babies. The first question is, if the mother is pregnant, can she transmit the disease to her baby? The second is, does a baby have natural immunity? There have been some cases where babies have been found to be COVID positive.
I thought I mentioned that in my slide. For those who missed it, there is so far no evidence that that there is transmission in the mother's belly while she is pregnant to the baby, and that's very, very good news. At the same time, most hospitals, because we know the epidemic is around, whenever a pregnant mom who is sick is delivering, she is being given a mask and the baby is immediately being taken away from her, such that in that room, if the mother, even if she has a mask, she's screaming, she's in pain, so she might be emitting those droplets with virus, but the baby is being taken quickly away from her, and not being put, unfortunately, on her chest for those COVID-19 moms, so that the baby doesn't get it by inhaling the mother's respiratory secretions. There have been 3 or 4 cases from China, again, not from the US, where they claimed that there was vertical transmission. The data is very poor. There was no real amniotic fluid or placenta testing. They just said, well, the baby was positive. We did everything. We put masks and everything. So we think the baby got it from the mom, with no proof, really anecdotal. But here in the US right now, we have thousands and thousands of pregnant women. In my own hospital, I have taken care of at least 60 women who delivered their babies. And I can say that the babies have done well. Now, on the other side, some pregnant women, just like any other adult I mentioned to you, themselves are at risk for severe disease. And we've had several women who, during the 2nd week of illness themselves, had to be intubated, had to go to the intensive care unit. And if they're not yet full term, 38 week, 40 week, and they go into that illness, they have delivered premature babies. So preterm labor or premature labor has been seen, unfortunately, in pregnant women who develop the complications of COVID-19, but their babies so far have been doing well. I must tell you that there is now a registry of collecting all this amniotic fluid and placenta and trying to see, to do testing on them. But in our experience, we haven't seen that yet.
While we wait for another question or two, it's hard to believe time is flying by so fast. We're going to be closing soon, but we will take some more questions. You mentioned a registry. There is also something that people who have recovered from COVID-19 disease can do, and that is to be generous and donate your blood. You can call the Red Cross for your local donation center. And there are a lot of trials, as Dr. Kojaglanian alluded to, across the country where they're trying to determine in an evidence-based scientific way whether convalescent serum, the antibodies that you have, are going to be effective in helping people that are critically ill. So this is something that we encourage you to do. Blood donation, it's a good thing to do at any point, but at this point, there is a shortage of donor serum for these studies, and it would be a wonderful thing for each of you to do. There was a question about conjunctivitis. Dr. Kojaglanian alluded to it. I'm an ophthalmologist. Initially, the Academy did send out an advisory saying that conjunctivitis or pink eye was a complication of COVID-19 disease, and it has been found in the tear secretions. However, more studies have been done, and the risk of developing pink eye or conjunctivitis from COVID-19 is extremely small, 1% or less. There was one question that came up about using vinegar to clean surfaces. Another question about using 70 proof alcohol from your bar to clean surfaces, Celine. Can you make a comment on that?
Sure. I think we have done APO alerts. Hopefully, all of you on this call are reading them because we're providing almost all this information on an almost weekly basis in those alerts. So vinegar really has no role. If you like the taste of vinegar, you think it's doing good for your vegetables, go ahead. We're not going to stop you. But really, there is no evidence that vinegar is going to do anything to clean either your vegetables or your surfaces. For the surfaces, guys, just use the regular household disinfectants you always buy. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, nothing new. Anything over the counter you always bought should be used to clean and disinfect home surfaces or packaging or whatever you want to disinfect.
So you're saying we can still order takeout food?
Yes, takeout food has come up before. There is zero evidence that this, when you swallow this virus, that you can get the disease. So it is not a foodborne virus, it's a respiratory virus. So therefore, any food you bring in, whether you want to eat it raw, you want to eat it cooked like a pizza or whatever, even let's say somebody is crazy enough to sneeze on it, that you should be okay because you are going to first wash your hands before eating and then put it in your mouth and swallow it. And there's, as I said, zero evidence that there is a transmission that way. Does that answer the question?
I think you did a wonderful job. Both
Okay.
of you were just so superb. And both of you are getting lots of thank yous from the audience about how informative and how articulate you both are. And we want to thank you. There have been a few questions as we come near the end that are really technical, and I'm not sure we want to get into too much detail. But is it the virus that causes people to be critically ill, or is it the body's response to the virus that destroys the lung tissue that causes bad outcomes?
That's a very good question, actually. And so I would say it's both. You know, God created us with a certain set of genes and a certain way we respond to noxious stimuli. And again, I just gave the simple example of some celebrities because you might have heard that, for example, George Stephanopoulos on ABC has no symptoms and his wife was in bed for 2 weeks, or other Cuomo and his wife. I'm giving New York examples, but there are many, many such examples where one pair of the couple is hospitalized and the other isn't. And really that comes to the immune system and how the immune system is reacting to this virus. In the very sick patients who are hospitalized, a subset of them, their immune system is literally overreacting and causing much more damage to our healthy tissues than the virus is. And in those subset of patients where their inflammation is so high, because again, the immune response is so overactive that we are using different medications for that subset of patients, what we call interleukin-6 inhibitors. There is 3 of them in the market, 1 in the market and the other 2 in clinical trials. So again, how the real pathogenesis of this virus is going to be in tissues, it all remains to be seen. Doctors and scientists are studying it actively, but we definitely know that in a subset of patients, the overactive immune response, unfortunately, is leading to major complications.
I really want to thank Dr. Kojaglanyan for her expertise in this area and being so generous with her time and sharing it. Dr. Kim Hakimian has been really, again, a leader in this area and has been so generous sharing her expertise with us as well. If any of you have any questions, you can email your questions at info@oppo.org. If any of you have any specific problems that you need to be addressed, where you can't reach your physician or you know of someone who is ill or someone who needs something, please do not hesitate to call us at info@oppo.org. Thank you very much again and have a great day.